Good afternoon. My name is Brian Bischoff, and I'm Managing Director of CapTech's Digital Solutions Services. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Enabling Mobile First via a Multi-Channel Architecture. For a quick overview, CapTech is a nationally recognized full-service management and information technology consulting company headquartered in Richmond, Virginia, with offices in Northern Virginia, Charlotte, and Philadelphia. CapTech's engagements are delivered via 3 practice areas: management consulting, systems integration, and data management and business intelligence. Today's webinar focuses on our mobile service offering that is delivered through our systems integration practice. CapTech has significant domain expertise in financial services, healthcare, retail, utilities, and government. For more information on our company, visit captechconsulting.com or visit our consultants' blogs at blogs.captechconsulting.com. Here's an overall agenda for today's webinar. We have 45 minutes planned for this webinar, which includes a Q&A session at the end. We'll go through some quick introductions of the speakers and then get into the details of the webinar, which includes a look at today's mobile ecosystem, what is mobile first, how to enable your mobile first strategy, and some examples of client results we have seen. The chat will be open throughout the WebEx to submit your questions. We will address any questions relevant to the current topic throughout the webinar, but we'll also leave time at the end to answer submitted questions. We encourage you to share your thoughts on Twitter via hashtag CTVMobile, and you can also find us on Twitter at CapTech Listens. This webinar will be recorded and available for review and to share with your colleagues a few days after the event. And now for an introduction of our speakers today, I will hand it over to Matt Kessler.
Hey, my name is Matt Kessler. I'm a developer by day here at CapTech. My focus is on helping our clients with web and mobile web technologies.
Hi, my name is Nathan Jones. I'm a manager responsible with helping our clients craft their mobile strategies and deliver native experiences on the iOS platform.
And I'm Steve Jansen. I'll be starting us off today by discussing several themes in the current mobile ecosystem that highlight the need for our clients to consider when developing their mobile strategy. I'm currently the project manager for a mobile web team at one of our financial services clients. So when we look at today's mobile ecosystem, we see 3 themes that are relevant to today's topic. The first theme is that information is being consumed by users across many mobile devices. Secondly, end users are demanding more of their mobile applications. And last but not least, there's been incredible growth within the mobile space in recent years, and that is only expected to continue. So users today aren't just using their mobile devices, smartphones, and iPads as an alternative to their desktops or laptops. Mobile devices are always within reach, and in fact, recent studies have shown that 77% of mobile searches are actually performed from home or at the workplace when users have a computer at hand. But we're not just talking about desktop versus mobile usage. We're talking about the use of many mobile devices concurrently. This past holiday season, in fact, 67% of consumers claim that they used multiple devices when doing their holiday shopping. Just think about how you've already interacted with mobile devices today. Myself, before I even arrived at work today, had already checked email on 2 separate iPhones. I read the news on an iPad, and I reviewed this PowerPoint deck on my laptop. In addition to having more mobile devices that we're interacting with on a daily basis, we're becoming more and more dependent on these devices. Let's face it, we're addicted to our mobile devices. We've only been speaking here for about 5 minutes, and I've already seen Nate look at his phone once here. But I won't feel particularly offended. If you look at the picture on the right, this is the first family at an inauguration event in their honor, the first break in action, and they're already heads down on their iPhones. So in addition to this addiction to mobile devices, we also have greater expectations from a performance perspective. Most recent studies show that if a mobile site doesn't load within 10 seconds, then users will abandon that site and go elsewhere. Last but not least is the fact that mobile growth has gone through the roof in recent years. This is a great example published in the New York Daily News of the first public address by Pope Benedict in 2005. If you look at this image, down in the bottom right corner, you see one single smartphone illuminated.
And Steve, this actually reminds me of a stretch goal one of our financial services clients had in 2008, where their goal was that 5% of their overall traffic would be done from mobile devices via SMS or mobile web. And that may seem a little silly these days, but few people anticipated the growth that mobile has had.
Yeah, and the key point on that is that was a stretch goal, so they thought they were really reaching there with a 5% target. So if you cut to the most recent public address by the new Pope Francis earlier this year, you see that St. Peter's Square is illuminated with all sorts of different devices. You have iPads, you have phones, you have cameras, but it really shows you the great growth we've seen in mobile recently. And this growth is only expected to continue. By the end of this year, it's projected that there will be more connected mobile devices than people on the planet. And additionally, by 2015, it is projected that more people will access the internet from a mobile device than from a personal computer. These themes should highlight that if you haven't already started thinking about your mobile strategy, then now's the time. Nate and Matt will walk you through mobile first as one potential strategy and how we recommend it is implemented at our clients today.
Hey, thanks, Steve. This is Matt again. This is just a quote from a recent talk Google's Eric Schmidt gave. It just illustrates that mobile first is certainly a pretty big buzzword these days. But the problem with buzzwords is that everyone has a different understanding of what they mean. So for this webinar, we've picked two definitions that we're going to focus on. The first is coming at it from more of the business strategy side with a focus on the enterprise. And then the second definition, and it's probably the more common one you've heard, it looks at mobile first with regards to website and app design and how that can play into your existing IT architecture. So coming at it from the strategy side, the biggest point is that mobile first is really more of a mindset or kind of a cultural guideline. Going back to Eric's quote, when you think of your users, think about how they're going to experience your site or your brand on their mobile devices. Things like when and where are they going to use your product, and what are they trying to accomplish. This is something we'll explore a little later. Next point on the strategy side is that this isn't about implementation. And by that I mean, how you're actually going to execute on your strategy and get your mobile products up and running. What tools are you going to use, that sort of thing. There's a ton of different ways to go mobile, and probably an equal number of opinions on which is the best method. It's easy to get caught in the weeds thinking about, how is the site going to scale down or how are images going to be served up to save bandwidth. But at this stage, you just want to try and avoid that stuff and focus on user experience as much as possible. The last point here is we're not just talking about websites when we say mobile first. Native apps are obvious too, but you can also look at things like advertising and marketing campaigns, promotional materials, third-party APIs and interfaces. You can look at all this through the lens of mobile first. So that's the strategy aspect. How do we put all this into practice? This is more the common understanding out there when you hear mobile first. It basically says when you set out to design a new experience, design the mobile experience before any others. It is a form of progressive enhancement, which is basically just a design philosophy that says, start with the most basic functionality and then add on when we can. In our case, it's saying, as the screen sizes get larger and the devices get more capable, let's gracefully add new functionality in. This buys you some good things, but it also has some drawbacks, which I'll get into a little bit later. So while we're talking about design, here's kind of a fictitious site that I threw together. I think we've all probably used sites like this before. I had e-commerce in mind, but really it doesn't matter because all these sites look the same. You get the single big image at the top. Sometimes if you're lucky, you get a carousel and you can swipe right or left, scroll through a couple images. And then you have all these big oversized buttons because, they're easy to tap, right? And that's it. That's your whole mobile site. I think we can agree that, this isn't the best user experience, and we can definitely say this was not a result of a mobile-first strategy. This is more the result of mobile as an afterthought, kind of a bolt-on solution, and it's actually really common right now with our clients. But it's becoming increasingly important to get this right, because as Steve mentioned earlier, users are expecting a lot more than this, and they'll favor a competitor that provides a better experience. So what this illustrates really is the second point I want to make, which is that it's really about creating a distinct user experience. Users have a different set of priorities while mobile, and your experience should take those into account. For example, as a writer or a blogger, I'm probably not going to want to compose an entire blog post from my phone, but it would be nice if I could maybe publish a draft or moderate comments on an existing post. Thinking about mobile design also lets us provide extra kind of mobile-only features, like taking advantage of device sensors, the camera, the gyroscope, location services that may not be available on desktops. So let's quickly hit on what mobile first is not. We hear a lot about responsive design these days, and this is just a technique that tries to figure out things like the user screen size and adjust the resulting content appropriately. Generally, you're going to be responding down. That is, you start with the largest screen size, you start with your desktop, and then you figure out some breakpoints, maybe a tablet breakpoint and a phone breakpoint, and then you start hiding, content and functionality as you get smaller. The other common paradigm is a mobile-only site. Think like m-dots, like m.walmart.com or m.lowes.com. These are sites that are just meant to be used from mobile devices only, and there's typically, some sort of user agent or software detection going on, and you get redirected to the special version of the site. Neither of these alone are what we mean when we say mobile first, but they can certainly factor into your overall strategy. For example, your site could have a blog section that is responsive. It uses a responsive design, but your overall site may not be responsive. So that's pretty much how we're defining mobile first today. I'm going to kick it over to Nathan to discuss some things to think about when you're considering mobile first.
Thanks, Matt. Now that we understand what mobile first is and is not for the purposes of this webinar, it's important to understand if it's a strategy that fits your particular situation. It's important to know that mobile first isn't one size fits all. It may not even be right for your particular organization, but over the next couple slides, we'll outline when it may be something to consider. Now, first and foremost, you need to have a solid understanding of your product, your customers, and how your customers interact with you. Some typical questions may be, when are they actively browsing our site or our apps? Do our customers typically come back multiple times a day, once a day, weekly? When they do come, how long are they sticking around? And do our customers access our properties from a range of devices, being phone, tablets, and perhaps a desktop computer at their place of work? Understanding these usage patterns is important because it factors into things such as the amount of time a consumer has to dedicate to the activity and even potentially the mood they're in. Perhaps they're laying in bed relaxing before going to sleep and they just need to fire off a quick email, for example. Usage from desktops is understandably higher throughout the workday, but during commuting hours, phones reign supreme, and at night, during the hours of 8 and 10 p.m., phones and tablets are the primary choice, with usage patterns that are pretty similar. These periods, while people are commuting and relaxing, are important because that's when customers are most attentive and receptive to performing various tasks. They expect an experience that makes that easier. Another item to understand is how customers are getting to you. Did they launch a previously downloaded application or simply visit your website? Mobile devices are extremely personal, and people take pride in showing off the apps and web clips that make their homepage or their first page of their device. A utility client of ours understood that customers were unlikely to download and maintain an application on their phone just to report a power outage in the situation. But they understood that when customers do need to report an outage, they're going to go to their mobile device to do so because they've lost power and presumably the Wi-Fi at their house. In this case, after understanding their customers and how they would be interacting with them, a mobile web experience was the clear answer. Another indicator that mobile first may be right for your organization is if you're already planning a redesign of your existing presence. Going back to what Steve mentioned earlier, by the end of 2013, the number of mobile devices connected to the internet is expected to surpass the number of humans on Earth. Interpreted a slightly different way, there's a significant chance that people browsing your site in the future will be doing so from a mobile device. Redesigning your existing site is the perfect opportunity to think mobile first and translate that into an experience that delights users across all form factors. The good news is that the majority of the mobile browsers today are just as capable as their desktop counterparts, making progressive enhancement and factor in the least common denominator that Matt mentioned earlier, an actual powerful device. Mobile first tends to fit very well with content-heavy, consumption-focused organizations. Anything that doesn't require intense amount of data entry tends to be the perfect solution. When we say content-heavy, we don't mean that mobile first is only right for written content. We mean it can include e-commerce, product catalogs, audio, and even video. Going back to the quote from Matt, Google has transitioned to a mobile-first strategy, and they have products that span the entire spectrum. But if you look at them, they're primarily focused on consuming content. Even where there is data entry required, take Gmail for example, they've stripped down the user interface to the bare essentials to facilitate sending of email. On the other hand, if you're creating software for accountants to enter complicated tax returns, mobile first or mobile at all probably isn't something you should be considering. The experience would be unnecessarily constrained, and the probability for errors on returns would just be too high. That said, another important thing is to consider whether or not you control your content and the content creation and deployment process. While there are certainly options available for displaying large amounts of content on mobile devices, the real estate is limited. There just isn't the space to display longer product descriptions that you typically find on full-blown websites. One of our clients receives product information from third-party providers, which has led to text being truncated programmatically throughout the mobile channel. What this translates to is product descriptions that aren't optimized and may not fully deliver the call to action descriptions that they're hoping. Mobile customers want to get the information most pertinent most quickly, which often requires a process change for marketing and product departments to create content specifically tailored to the different form factors. That all being said, there are still some situations where mobile first isn't necessarily the correct strategy. As Matt mentioned, mobile first is a paradigm shift. It's a completely different way of thinking, and it's not a quick win solution. Kevin Lynch, who recently joined Apple, gave the Adobe Max keynote in 2010, where he compared the transition we're seeing today to the PC revolution, and noted that it's even larger. Lastly, mobile first is an enterprise-wide change. It's not a silver bullet. If your organization doesn't have a mobile strategy yet, that should be the primary focus versus implementing mobile first. Even if mobile first is part of the eventual solution, focus on your strategy up front. Companies are going to incredible lengths to instill a mobile first mindset in their employees. Fast Company recently published an article about how Facebook is so focused on their mobile strategy that they completely disabled the Facebook's website internally to force employees to use and think about mobile products and features from the mobile point of view. Mobile first is a journey, and we think everyone can get there, but the key is to initiate that transformation now before getting left behind. One additional thing to keep in mind when considering mobile first as a strategy is how tightly coupled your front and back end systems are. A tightly coupled environment will make the transformation even that much more difficult, and Matt is here to talk a little bit about implementation considerations as you move forward with the mobile strategy.
Thanks, Nate. This is Matt again. So here are just some more things to consider when you go to actually implement your strategy. First off, mobile design is actually pretty hard to get right. Designers are used to things like huge desktops, tons of real estate, And they've also gotten really good at using some techniques that may not translate to mobile. A good example of this is hover state. So, this is when you have your mouse cursor and you hover over an element on a page and something happens, it changes. Think about menus. Some sites are written to use hover state menus. This entire concept just doesn't exist on mobile, and those sites wouldn't work on mobile. Mobile also presents challenges for copywriters, compliance departments. There's just a lot less room for verbose descriptions and legalese and things like that on mobile devices. There are also a lot more constraints when implementing mobile. Screen size is the obvious one, but you have to also think about users with poor or no cell service, low bandwidth, data cap connections, offline mode. There's also the issue of this huge ecosystem of devices out there. I saw a stat just this week that there are now over 4,000 distinct Android devices. If anyone can remember the browser wars of the late 90s, early 2000s, it's like that, only a lot worse. I'm helping a client currently with a mobile solution. Our basic test suite of devices for our site is in like the 10 to 15 different phone numbers. And we're constantly finding weird issues like this one subversion of Android doesn't support this specific JavaScript function that you happen to need throughout the whole site. These sort of issues are really common when doing mobile development, and you just have to kind of plan for them up front. The last point is something we hit on before, and that's mobile users generally have a higher level of expectation from your product. A good example of this is being able to share things on social media sites. So while the user's on your site, they want to go ahead and share what they're doing to their Twitter or Facebook. If you've ever used the APIs provided by these sites, you know that they aren't the most reliable, and they frequently change. So you have to kind of take that into account as well when you're planning. On the other hand, starting small does have some advantages. A lot of full screen features don't degrade very well to mobile devices. So, the obvious example here is Flash content. It just doesn't work. It's not supported on iOS devices. It goes beyond just Flash, though. If you think about any large videos or widgets, anything with a lot of tabular data, by starting small, you can tackle these problems up front and make sure you have solved them, for the hardest platform before you scale up to the larger screens. The other thing when you start small is there's no unnecessary hidden content. So I mentioned that when talking about responsive design, one of the common patterns is that on the scaled down site, all of the content and images are still actually in the page and downloaded to the device and taken up memory, and then they're just hidden using CSS. If you start out building the small site, that content will never be there in the first place, so you avoid that issue. The last thing is starting out mobile sort of guides you down the path to a more mature IT architecture. And this isn't necessarily specific to mobile first, but we're going to talk a little bit about it because we believe this is the real key to being successful with any mobile strategy. So what does a typical mobile architecture look like? You start with your prototype or proof of concept. We're using an iPhone app in this example. And it can do just a couple things at first. It's great, it works, does everything it needs to do. But then we want to go ahead and add some functionality, which probably requires talking to some more backend systems and databases. Well, those systems are written in different languages, different programming languages, and they use different message formats. So now your app has to be smarter to decode all these different formats. So that's fine. We'll just push out an update. We'll add some extra code to talk to these new systems. But now let's say you want to add some more channels. Let's say you want to have an Android app, a Windows Phone app, and a mobile optimized website. Well, so now all this code has to be duplicated across 4 different platforms, which is a pain, but it's doable. We can do that. But let's say you decide to update to a new version of one of these backend systems. Well, let's say the new version of the backend system, instead of using the SOAP message format like it previously did, let's say they changed it and now they use JSON. So you have to update all of your apps, all of your sites, and you quickly realize this is not a situation that can work in the long term.
Not only does this complicate the logic on the devices to parse the different response structures and data formats, it makes each application a little more fragile as they're tied directly to the back end. This really becomes apparent when the app needs to go through an approval process before it can be released, where review times aren't guaranteed. What this leads to is a situation where 3 or 4 applications are ready to go, but you can't release any of them until that final one is actually approved. This also requires a tighter coordination between your front and back end teams to ensure that releases go smoothly.
Thanks, Dave. So this is CapTech's approach that we've successfully implemented in multiple clients. I won't go into too much detail here, but the general idea is we stand up this intermediary web service layer. We call it the remote facade. This layer is responsible for interacting with all the various backend systems and exposing them to clients on a single endpoint using a single message format. Generally, it's going to be a RESTful web service using JSON, but it doesn't have to be. So by decoupling your devices and end channels from your backend systems, you can focus on what matters most, the user experience, and not get stuck writing a bunch of infrastructure code in multiple distinct places. This approach also makes it easy to add an entirely new channel, one that it doesn't even have to exist today. So let's say Facebook decides to get into the hardware business and they release a device and it becomes a huge hit. Your organization might decide it needs a Facebook device app to stay competitive. You still have to build this new app, but you can now reuse all of the existing backend code, and you don't have to rewrite any infrastructure or proprietary message parsing code.
Yeah, this is actually a question we get quite frequently from clients is how does this impact my development time? And with the majority of your business logic maintained within the facade, this actually allows device applications to remain relatively lightweight. And we've seen significant reductions in development time as clients choose to deploy to an additional channel or additional platform. One of our clients, while releasing the facade and initial iPhone application, took approximately a year. They were able to roll out Android specific and mobile web releases in 8 and 6 months respectively, which is a pretty significant savings.
Yeah, I was actually on the front end web team for that project, and it was nice because we could just focus completely on the front end web code. We didn't have to worry about back end systems. We didn't have to worry about parsing the data. It was all there, and we could just focus on the user experience.
Yeah, so Matt brings up a good point, is that your developers no longer require the back-end knowledge and sometimes tribal knowledge of some of these older systems. Their ramp-up time is dramatically decreased as they're handed a document of the API and they can just get to work immediately.
So yeah, this is really the bread and butter of CapTech's mobile approach. If you'd like some more info on this, we did a whole webinar on just this topic last year. The slides are available to download from the mobile section of our website, captechconsulting.com. Now I'm going to kick it back over to Steve to talk about some of the results we've seen at our various clients.
So in addition to the benefits that the architecture provides that Nate and Matt just walked through, we've been able to identify the results we've seen at some of our clients that have implemented these strategies into three categories. We've seen our clients build stronger relationships with their customers. We've also seen examples of the clients empowering and energizing employees and also enabling an additional feedback channel that didn't previously exist. As far as the customer relationships go, we've seen clients that by providing these mobile channels and unique mobile experiences, customers are more loyal and more apt to revisit the store. Additionally, we've seen examples of clients investing in employee technologies and providing employees with mobile capabilities that didn't previously exist before. So in addition to assisting them in their daily jobs, it also re-energized them by providing them with current technologies that they use on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I think the fact that they use these on a daily basis in their personal lives is important to kind of latch on to. When employers release apps to make an employee's job easier or to enable them to do something new, that really gets them excited. One example being a mobile proof of concept for a point-of-sale solution that we rolled out at a retail client. We had a couple employees that were so excited about what this was going to enable them to do that they were actually chasing customers down the aisles, helping them find product, and immediately asking them if they could check them out right then and there so that they could get them out of the store and onto something else.
So an additional result that this enables as well is an additional feedback channel that didn't previously exist before. So with the native app stores, you have a new feedback channel that didn't exist where users are able to go in and provide star ratings, provide detailed feedback and reviews. One particular client, we were able to roll out a brand new native application, and they went from having no presence in the App Store to a 4.5-star rated app. Additionally, a lot of our clients regularly mine the reviews and help that to inform their product backlogs and future capabilities that they wish to add. Additionally, by being smart about the approach we take with our data and tagging effectively throughout the architecture, you're able to monitor capabilities and validate their adoption. One particular example we have is we enabled a remote deposit capture capability for a financial services client, and they've been able to monitor and confirm assumptions they had about the adoption of remote deposit capture and folks taking pictures on their phones of their checks and depositing them at the bank. What they've realized is a steady growth and continual adoption of this, and the most interesting fact is they've noticed that it hasn't cannibalized deposits through their other channels. So to wrap us up and summarize here, we recommend that clients consider a mobile-first strategy. We also know that multi-channel architecture is important in enabling your mobile-first strategy. And through this strategy and multi-channel architecture, we've seen them proven successful at our clients across industries. It hasn't just been retail and financial services. We've also seen it at telecom clients, federal clients, and a couple other industries. So Brian has been monitoring feedback and questions throughout the webinar, and I think he has a couple questions that have been submitted that we'll address. If you need to contact us or get a hold of us for detailed questions, feel free to contact Matt, Nate, or myself.
Thanks. I'd like to thank Matt, Nate, and Steve for the content here. We have received a few questions through the various channels, and I encourage you to continue to ask questions as they may pop up throughout this Q&A session. But I do want to kick things off with a question specifically around HTML5. And the question is, I've heard a lot about HTML5 and how it can easily support multiple devices. Why would we not simplify our strategy and use HTML5 for everything?
Hey, Brian, this is Matt. So yeah, HTML5, it's a great tool for supporting multiple devices. There's a lot of wrapper applications like PhoneGap and Cordova that can deploy to multiple native devices with one code base. But in practice, we found, it's rarely that easy. I mentioned before all the different device fragmentation. You end up writing a bunch of kind of device-specific code that kind of pollutes your code base, and it can quickly be, not just one code base for your different devices. By splitting out and having separate products instead of just one code base, you can provide a more tailored user experience that we talked about and take advantage of device-specific features that aren't quite available with HTML5 yet, and Nate can go into a little more detail on those.
Yeah, so as Matt mentioned, it really comes down to the user experience you're trying to deliver. Some of the HTML5 and cross-platform products, they may be the right choice for simple applications, but we're not seeing the development time benefits that are being claimed. They've really become write once, tweak everywhere products when you're looking for robust situations. And some of these products really tend to break down as you start to get into some of those experiences and start having to deal with things like how the memory is managed below the covers and debugging from a development standpoint.
Yeah, so I guess I would say our preferred approach is a mobile-optimized website and then native apps for each channel that you want to support. And all of those products should use the same remote facade, so you get that good, reuse in the back end and all that stuff.
Thanks, guys. The next question is around testing, and how does a mobile-first strategy affect our existing testing approach or strategy?
Okay, that's a good one. So I can speak to some of the experiences I've had with mobile testing from the mobile website side. One of the huge benefits of the multi-channel architecture approach is the testing savings that you get from the remote facade. So no matter how many channels you have, all that business logic and backend code only has to be tested once. on the remote facade. And then you don't have to worry about it again unless there's some kind of weird, device-specific quirk that pops up. The other thing is there's great tools produced by the device manufacturers. There's a great iOS simulator that ships with Xcode, and there is an Android simulator. So we use that extensively with mobile web testing. And really, you can't get away from actual physical devices. Like I mentioned, we have a suite of test devices that we use routinely. There's just certain quirks and certain device-specific things that only pop up on the actual devices. So that's a highly recommended approach.
Yeah, from the native perspective, even though iOS and Xcode ships with a simulator and Android has an emulator, to Matt's point, it's important to test on devices and test in the field. There's so many different network-related situations that can come up that will drive developers crazy trying to account for them. There was a situation where Zynga was testing a new game and ran into a situation that was only presented on T-Mobile iPhones, and it came down to a situation where that particular developer's phone was actually marked as part of the IPv6 transformation, and that was the only way they could recreate it. So it's important to test these in the wild on devices off the Wi-Fi networks.
Okay, thanks. I think that's all the questions that we had. We'd like to thank everybody for attending. And again, if you have any further questions about the content in this webinar, please feel free to reach out to the names and addresses you see on the screen, or continue questions through Twitter. Thanks.